Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody, to our July presentation of the Fiduciary Education Forum. I'm Todd Wohl with Braun International and Premier Estates International. We are proud founders and supporters of the Fiduciary Education Forum, which is our monthly presentation. Or I should say, it's our the Fiduciary Education Forum is a organization that promotes education relating to different aspects of assets, estate and trust issues, the fiduciary world, and assets that surround estates and trusts that either are managed or valued, or in some cases need to be sold, monetized. So our focus really is purely about education. And to that point, I'm really pleased to have Matt Markatos, who is a chartered financial analyst, CFA, and senior vice president with Whittier Trust. Whittier Trust is a extremely well-known and I like to say very high level of service trust company that's founded, I believe, in Southern California. I'll let Matt go into that. And Matt's topic today, I felt, was going to be really important for our viewers, talking about the family office and how trust companies and fiduciaries in the trust world interact together collectively. And Matt, who I've known through for quite a while through an estate planning organization, really is at the top of his field, and I was very impressed with his knowledge, and I thought he would be a fantastic speaker for the organization and for our viewers. So with that, Matt, I'll let you start out, and we'll go through the presentation. So thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Todd. Thanks for the very warm introduction. As Todd, referenced, I have been in the wealth management world for almost 30 years, and was honored to open and launch.
If you have your mic on, please mute yourself. Thank you.
Launched the West LA office about 3 years ago, and I put together a slide deck that really has two parts. And Todd, referred to the first part in terms of how can a multifamily office like Whittier Trust partner with a private fiduciary, a certified public accountant, or a trust and estate lawyer. Because what we really view ourselves is the quarterback for the professional team of a client. And, for a private fiduciary, you guys have a lot on your plate. And for us to be able to be a resource for you, whether it be in the philanthropic world, whether it be investment management, whether it be real estate, you would continue to spearhead the fiduciary relationship, but maybe we can help grow your business by being a resource for you. For the trust and estate attorneys, what we do is brainstorm ideas with clients and then bring those ideas to you, the drafting attorney, to make a client's goals and objectives come to fruition. And similarly for the accounting, we partner with CPAs all over the country, whether it be for simple tax returns or trust returns, whatever it may be. But again, we're trying to be tax sensitive, tax futuristic in terms of, anticipating where tax liabilities may be and trying to get in front of that liability. The second part of the presentation, if we have time, is to go through a case study of how we add that value. You know, how do we interact with a client, interact with a family, and look at their balance sheet and work with the fiduciary, work with the accountant, and or work with the trust and estate attorney, again, to make those goals happen for the family, whether it's soft goals such as cultural or legacy, or whether it's financial goals in terms of reducing taxes and growing wealth and transferring that wealth to future generations. So with that, we can go to the next slide. And please, if you have questions as I go through the presentation, you know, feel free to raise your hand, and Todd or Connor will you know, ask the question. So just a little bit about Whittier Trust. We are the oldest multifamily office headquartered on the West Coast. The family office began in the early 1900s, and we expanded to a multifamily office in the late 1980s. We work with approximately 588 families. So, you know, Todd referenced that high touch and white glove service, and we have about 250 employees, about 600 clients. So you can do the math on the client to employee ratio. For someone like myself, a client advisor, I work with less than 25 families. And on average, we're, you know, 25 to 1 in terms of advisor to client ratio. Importantly, we started a registered investment advisor about 2 years ago. And so that allows us to work with fiduciaries, for example, who want to outsource the investment management to us as an agent. And we can take on smaller relationships. As you see on the slide, our typical minimum relationship size is $10 million, but with the registered investment advisor, we can go, you know, down to $2 or $3 million. And, you know, with a partner such as a fiduciary, we can actually aggregate assets. So if we're working with a private fiduciary on the investment management, we can pass along cost efficiencies with the scale that that fiduciary brings to the table. So to use an easy example, if a fiduciary had 25 relationships that they were working with, and the average size was $2 million on the investment management, we would look at that as a $50 million relationship, since we have really only one client, the private fiduciary. And we would then allow the fiduciary to interact with the clients directly as opposed to us. So again, the idea that we're working in partnership with a client's other professions. We go to the next slide. Again, a little bit more about Whittier Trust. What I really want to highlight here is the diagram. And if you look at the diagram, on the top is the client, in the middle is professional advisors, and then there's Whittier Trust. And again, this is really the ethos we bring to the table. We want to work with the professional advisors, have those advisors interact with their clients. And we're not looking to take over all the relationships. We're looking to quarterback, we're looking to be strategic with all of the professional advisors to achieve, you know, a family's goals and objectives. And then within these 5 pillars of our service model, we have the trust services. Again, happy to work with professional fiduciaries, not interested in being the fiduciary on every relationship. However, you know, our trust company in Nevada might be a benefit to a fiduciary that's located in California. And with a more complex client, there might be gift trust opportunities in Nevada for tax, you know, advantages. Family office, you know, that's again for the more complicated client, larger balance sheet, in need of all the services listed there. That would probably apply more towards either an accountant we work with, who might be the CFO for the family office, or with a trust and estate lawyer where, you know, again, the family needs a family office service. Investment management and consulting, probably the most relevant pillar that we can partner with and offer to the group on this call. I'll spend more time talking about that. Philanthropic services. Our philanthropic services goes back over 100 years. And we have both a donor advised platform, and we also can administer foundations. Real estate, we're one of the few multifamily office trust companies that will actually hold real estate in trust. Most folks, when the matriarch or patriarch passes away and the estate is settled, if a trust company is involved or even a private fiduciary, they don't have the resources to maintain that real estate in trust if that's what's best for the subsequent generations. And because of the Whittier family, which is essentially the single family office that started the multifamily office, the Whittier families had real estate going back 5 or 6 generations. And so as we bring on new clients, particularly on the West Coast, which tend to be real estate heavy, we have the ability to keep that legacy for the family by being the fiduciary in that when others won't serve in that capacity. On the next slide, I'll spend a little bit more time on the investment management and consulting. We have the ability to create customized individual portfolios for clients. So what does that mean, customized? Everyone throws out customized portfolios. You know, oftentimes when we work with the family, there is a concentrated position of some sort. It could be Qualcomm back in the early 2000s when a lot of people, created a lot of wealth with Qualcomm. Today, that example is, the Magnificent Seven, right? It could be NVIDIA, it could be Apple, it could be Google, Microsoft, and so on. And what we can do is customize the portfolio for those concentrated positions. So, let's just use easy numbers. Let's say 20% of a client's marketable security portfolio is in a concentrated position, and it's a technology company. The last thing we want to do is buy an S&P 500 index fund that has 30% exposure to technology, adding to the 20% they already have, thereby resulting in a 50% exposure to technology. So what we will do is we will offset that concentration, again, if it's a technology position, by layering around that position and building out a custom portfolio of individual securities. I mentioned the fact that we can aggregate accounts to pass along cost savings to your clients. So in the private fiduciary world, if you're able to bring us several relationships, either at once or over time, we can pass on that scale to you and your clients. And then third, we have an alternative asset platform. So we can give your clients, where appropriate, exposure to hedge funds, to private equity, private debt, direct investments, venture capital, so on. And so again, to the degree that we can offer those resources to you and your clients, that can provide some leverage for you to be able to grow your business. On the next slide, this gives a lot of detail of our philanthropic platform. I'll start with foundations. That's kind of the easiest. We have a long tenure of administering foundations and can provide all the materials for board meetings and so on, should your client have a foundation. The donor advised platform is really for the everyday folk. It looks and feels exactly like a foundation without the cost, burden, and administrative hassle of a foundation. And the one unique thing about our donor advised platform versus some of the others you may have come across, such as, Schwab's got a robust platform, Fidelity has a robust platform. What our platform allows for is successor advisors. So again, when you think about a transfer of wealth across multiple generations, to be able to use the philanthropic vehicle, whether it's a foundation or a donor advised fund, to bring together multiple generations of a family and have that legacy pass through successor advisors within the family it's a really powerful tool. I work with a couple of families that have 3 or 4 generations, and families that were not necessarily close before we were working with them in some philanthropic capacity, who now that's the only thing they talk about. They may have $75 million or $200 million, and all they want to talk about is their $4 million donor advised fund, because that's what's meaningful to them. That's what brings the family together. So again, to the degree that you have clients who are charitably inclined, a lot of creativity here, a lot of opportunity to, add value to the client. The next page is family office. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but just kind of going left to right. Risk management is really referring to insurance. We don't sell insurance, but what we do is insurance reviews to make sure a family has mitigated any kind of risk. And we will go out to the marketplace on behalf of families and shop for either better coverage or the same coverage at a lesser price, whatever it may be. And this, whether it be property and casualty or life, that's something we can do on the family office side. Financial services really revolves around budgeting and involving folks, whether it be payroll, whether it be bookkeeping, whatever it may be, working with those professionals and helping a client succeed there. Client administration is really reporting. So to the degree that you need help as a fiduciary on the reporting, or as the accountant, or the CFO of a family office, if you've got multiple custodians and multiple accounts all over the place, our software allows for consolidated, aggregated reporting, just to make it easier for all the professionals involved. The next slide addresses real estate. Again, probably more reflective of larger clients. I mentioned the fact that we have the comfort and ability to act as the fiduciary for real estate. Something you're really not going to find out in the marketplace. And so to the degree that from a financial perspective or from a legacy perspective, that the real estate wants to remain in the family, we can provide that service. For clients with multiple real estate investments across various verticals, we can provide portfolio management. We're not going to go collect rents, but we will, hire the property managers, supervise the property managers, and again, aggregate and report. And then last, we have direct investment opportunities in real estate. So, at the moment, we're looking at purchasing a industrial property in Portland, Oregon. We shop in the sort of $50 million price point. That's above the mom and pops, but it's below institutional. And so we tend to provide a lot of value there in terms of shopping in that marketplace. And we'll do industrial, we'll do multifamily, we'll do mixed use. There are certain qualification requirements. You have to be over, have assets in excess of $5 million and so on. But again, to the degree that that is something that might appeal to your clients, we can provide those direct opportunities in real estate.
Matt, one of the places that we find fiduciaries, heavy with is, of course, real estate. And in many situations, we in our company might help bridge a financial gap, and have done so with other trust companies where there's financial pressure, liquidity issues, where we'll provide the fiduciary with funds, even short-term or medium-term, to solve the financial problem on process or on the way to a sale, as I like to say, to monetize the asset. But we have found that working with most of the major trust companies across the country that hire our company to do certain real estate services that we provide, that, having the array of services that you all do at Whittier, and having worked with and know your head of trust real estate, I can say to everybody on this call that it's a very hands-on, touchy type of relationship. And I think that's important for everybody to know, because some of the larger trust companies become, you're a little bit more of a number, of a file, and the services aren't reflective as the need. So what's important for our viewers is that even though this is a trust company, and you could look at, in some ways, Whittier being a competitor to a fiduciary's practice, in reality, it is not. It's a whole different array of services and knowledge and expertise, and candidly, protection for the fiduciary to turn to when in need. So I just wanted to add that. So go ahead, please, Matt.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, and comments are appreciated and well placed. So yeah, thank you. And just to reference our real estate group, we have 8 people in our real estate group. Again, focused on the client, and whether that client be a direct client of Whittier or a client of a fiduciary that we partner with, or with a CPA that we partner with. That high touch, white glove service, goes a long way. On the next slide, slide 8, Todd mentioned trust services and whether there is a competitive issue here. We really view our fiduciary services as a add-on to an existing client relationship. We're not necessarily in the business of offering trust services. And so the real value that we feel that we can offer is our Nevada trust company. Again, for the tax benefits, for the ability to have a dynasty trust that can last 365 years. There's a lot of case law around asset protection. Delaware is obviously, well known and established for trust law, though that tends to favor, corporate more than individual trusts. And so, there's a lot of advantages to having a trust citist in Nevada, particularly if the beneficiaries are outside of California. Okay, so that spends a lot of time on Whittier. Hopefully that gives you a good flavor of how we could possibly be a resource for other professionals that are on this call. The next part of my presentation goes through a case study that is hypothetical, but it's actually based on a real prospect and now client of mine that I worked with about 18 months ago. So if we move to the next slide, we will meet the Fockers. So again, hypothetical in terms of names, but this is Edward and Carol Focker. And everything that I'm about to detail here is factual aside from the people involved. So Edward, age 72, Carol is 67. They both co-founded a company called Excel Enterprises, and they own the majority of this company. They both plan to retire the next couple of years. Both are fiscally conservative, both hate paying taxes, and both California residents. Edward is a little bit philanthropic. Carol is very philanthropic. So just kind of setting the stage for kind of culture, personalities, and goals and objectives. On the next slide, we will meet Thor Jr. and Hillary. Thor is the son of Edward and Carol. And as you can see, both very dapper And as we get to the next slide, you'll see that Gertrude, who is Thor's sister, a little bit more spiritual. She doesn't have any interest in the business. She has two daughters. Go to the next slide, and there's a little bit of description of the family tree. And so this is something we always put together for our clients, a family tree with some key details. Thor is, 32. He actually works at Excel, and Edward and Carol have already begun transitioning the business to Thor by gifting him 10% of Excel. Gertrude, as I mentioned, not in the business at all. She does have a passive stake of 2.5% of the business. She's got some investment assets, really as a function of offsetting the gift to Thor. The key item with Gertrude is that she is single at the moment. She's recently widowed, but she also does not live in California. She moves in Iowa. So from a fact gathering standpoint, there's some interesting items here that we'll want to consider down the road. As we mentioned, Thor Jr. is alive. He's age 4, and Gertrude has 2 daughters, age 7 and 9. So as we meet with the family, we gather facts, and I've highlighted these 3 categories: family values, the estate plan, the family business, and cash flow. So Edward and Carol have indicated that they're very supportive of education, that they want G2, Generation 2, and G3 to be financially secure and good stewards of capital. I mentioned earlier that Edward has some philanthropic intent. Carol has a lot of philanthropic intent. From an estate plan perspective, they've only created a revocable family trust. They've used about $1.5 million of their collective lifetime gift exemption. Again, this was really related to prior gifts of Excel stock to the kids. A little bit about the business. Excel is growing, very rapidly. It's a B2B hardware company. The business generates about $50,000. Edward and Carol spend about $50,000 a month, and the business generates about $150,000 a month of after-tax cash flow. Again, these facts don't seem relevant at the moment, but as we get further down, you'll see why we gather the information. So what we then do is build a balance sheet. We've labeled it the Fokker Family Trust. On the left side, the assets that we've identified. On the right side, any liabilities. You can see that from a net worth perspective, Edward and Carol have done a great job. They built about $81 million in assets and have very little leverage. And assets span, across various asset classes. And I'm going to dive into each of these asset classes. So the first observation is what we've labeled as cash and cash equivalents. And as you can see, there's about $4.5 million of liquidity, $2 million in checking accounts, and a CD held at the bank earning 2.75%. And one of the things we notice as a fiduciary and investment manager and a family office is that there's some risk here. The cash balances exceed the FDIC insurance, and they've also got $2 million in a checking account, essentially earning nothing. So I'm sure all of you are aware that Fed funds is at 5.25%. Most money markets are paying in excess of 5%. And so to have $2 million, earning nothing is a little bit of a head scratcher. So something we would identify and bring up to the family. The 6-month CD, again, not very surprised that a bank would offer a CD at substantially below market rates. We would ask, why this is the case, and when the CD matures, or if there's not a prepayment penalty, we would suggest, something of equivalent safety, a 6-month treasury that, again, earning well in excess of 4 3/4 or 5% without any additional risk. The broader question is, given the fact finding that the company is generating $150,000 of after-tax cash flow, and Carol and Edward only need $50,000 for their monthly spend, why do we have so much liquidity here in general? And even if that much liquidity is desired, we would suggest an investment management solution of some sort of short-term fixed income cash management to increase the income and cash flow generated from this $4.5 billion of assets. The next chunk of assets are the actual investment accounts. And again, Carol and Edward have done a great job at accumulating assets, over $25 million of marketable securities. So, highlighting a couple things. One is the Apple stock. So they've got, $5.5 million of Apple at a very low basis. I mentioned our ability to work with concentrated positions at low cost. Last thing we want to do is blow out the Apple position and create a realized gain when Apple is a very high quality company, still growing. But there are potential solutions for the Apple stock. So I mentioned the ability to open a donor advised fund or create a family foundation. The Apple stock could be donated either partially or entirety to the donor advised fund or foundation, can be immediately diversified with no tax consequence. And it could go towards a family's goal, which Carol and Edward have stated, of getting G2 and G3 involved and becoming good stewards of capital. There could also be a case use for funding a charitable remainder trust with the Apple. And so I mentioned that Carol and Edward are considering retiring in the next 2 to 5 years, depending on what happens with the business and their level of interest in the business after they retire. There may be a need to create additional cash flow. So again, with the idea that they're philanthropically inclined, they could donate some or all of the Apple stock into a charitable remainder trust, create a 20-year annuity for themselves, and they can pick the rate of payback from anywhere. For those who aren't aware of a charitable remainder trust, essentially the way it works is you fund a charitable remainder trust, you state the annuity that you take out for as long as 20 years. The minimum required distribution is 5%, but you can go as high as 50%. Oftentimes we see a 10 to 15% rate of withdrawal that can supplement cash flow needs, and the balance at the end of the 20 years either goes outright to a charity or it can be directed towards the family's donor advised fund or foundation for funding. So a lot of creativity there, a lot of flexibility to achieve not only the philanthropic goals but the cash flow needs. Go back a slide, sorry. I'll move a little more quickly. The other thing, we notice here, there's 2 substantial 401k plans. And the question is, why are they invested in municipal bonds and treasuries? So 401ks are tax exempt entities. If the goal is to be conservative with the investments, that's fine. That makes sense. But they should be probably in taxable bonds or in treasury bonds at the very least, as opposed to municipals or short-term treasuries. Again, just increasing the income with no additional risk. I mentioned that Carol and Edward are educationally focused. I don't see anything about a 529 plan. So we would suggest, opening and funding 529 plans for the grandkids' education. Overall, when we look at the $25 million, rounding, we see about 1/3 invested towards growth, two-thirds towards preservation and income. And the question we would ask is, is this $25 million going to maintain purchasing power with that sort of asset allocation? And we would talk to the family about possibly tilting this asset allocation or improving the asset allocation to maintain purchasing power. And then last, when we look at someone with $80 million and $26 million of liquidity, we would raise the question of whether private equity, private debt, venture capital, hedge funds are appropriate for the family. And my guess is it probably would be. Okay, we can move on. Very briefly here, Excel, I mentioned and sort of referred to this being a family business. Thor is already involved. What is the succession planning? How can we help the family strategize that? What is the potential buy-sell agreement with Thor? And maybe other employees. Does the company want to consider going through an ESOP? That may be a way of creating liquidity. And then last, I referenced some valuation here. The company is generating $5 million of EBITDA. Edward and Carol have put a market value of $10 million. We would question whether, 2x EBITDA is the right number. Most companies, especially generating that kind of cash flow, over $1 million of cash flow, would see a, valuation in the 6 to 8x range.
Matt, one thing I want to just chime in real quick. I know we have limited time, but on the valuation side, for our viewers, when we're valuing a company for either 706 or 709 purposes, or maybe just general transfer, there's a very wide range in when you talk about operating companies, partnership interests, and so on. There's a very wide range of value or a price that can be provided by the appraiser or the appraisal firm, and that range would candidly be dictated based on the goals of the valuation. And we find that there are a lot of issues surrounding valuation of the asset, the company, of the interest, or candidly whatever it is. But in this case, an operating company, it becomes very complicated. And as I'm sure you're well aware, depending on who has majority or who the majority controlling partners are and how that valuation is used in their case may very well affect what your planning strategies are at Whittier or any of the fiduciaries or attorneys, whatever. Valuations, appraisals have to be used very strategically. And that's a very important thing to remember. Who's going to see it? Why are they reading it? What are their purposes? May be different than yours. And generally for estates, we are brought in every year to value the assets and set the basis. Not so much in real estate and fee simple, but in operating companies, partnership interests, of course, trust companies always need to have, and fiduciaries should be doing the same thing as setting a annualized value for their file. That's all I want to add. I'll let you go on.
Yeah, no, that excellent point. And the only thing I'll also add to your comments, Todd, and if there are any attorneys on the call, they'll be nodding their heads when I say this, but as the fiduciary, you always want to engage the attorney to work with Todd to get the valuations. You never want to have a direct line with the valuation firm because it decreases your flexibility with, coming up with those valuations as Todd refers to in terms of what are the objectives of the family. Is it for a 706 or is it for gifting purposes? And keeping the attorney as the middleman is very important. So yeah, going into real estate, again, I'll kind of move quickly, but things that we will point out, that for the fiduciaries on the call, are very familiar with. But are the residential properties titled in the revocable trust? Oftentimes clients don't do that. They have it in their personal name or a joint tenant with right of refusal ownership. Very important to have the rev trust be on title. It also presents gifting opportunities. So the ability to do a QPERT or a family LLC and donate the residence to the QPERT or the family LLC. You have discounting opportunities there from a valuation perspective and the ability to get assets out of your estate. On the industrial side, there's no indication here that these individual properties are in LLCs. So from a protection and risk mitigation perspective, we would recommend that. It also then ties into the insurance.
Matt, I just want to add something here for our viewers. Liability with real estate is the #1 issue for all of our viewers, and how to remove themselves or limit their liability. I have found, because we sell so much real estate for trusts, trustees, and so on and so forth, that people don't pay attention how the property is owned or titled within when they take on an estate. And I mean, there's pros and cons to this, but from a liability standpoint, either you better have a lot of liability, general liability insurance, slip and fall insurance, if it's directly in a trust name. I always say to a client, put it in an LLC. And I'm not speaking about a single family home. I'm speaking about a rental property, an industrial, commercial, retail, office, whatever it is, it should be in an LLC, so that removes the beneficiaries, the trustee, the fiduciary from liability. If God forbid there's a fire and people pass away, there's a slip and fall, whatever the issue is, we've seen the worst of it all. And without it being in a protective entity, you have really opened yourself to liability there. Unless, of course, you've got a heck of a lot of very good insurance. But even that, candidly, in this world today, it only counts for so much. So that's all I want to add. Please,
Yeah.
Matt.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, why don't we move on to the next slide? Okay, yeah, and kind of tying into what Todd just said, not only from the rental property perspective, but also from personal tangible property. And so 2 items that are mentioned on the balance sheet: the life insurance, is Edward's policy in a ILIT, an insurance trust. That's an easy estate planning maneuver to get assets out of the estate upon Edward's passing. Second is they've got a $10 million second to die life insurance policy to take care of potential estate taxes. With an $80 million, balance sheet that's going to be growing over time, is that $10 million adequate to cover the potential estate tax, or is the family going to have to sell assets potentially at a time that is not ideal? We talked about umbrella policy. Obviously a lot of fine arts, antiques, and car collections. Have those been itemized on the home insurance policy? Is there a special items policy that they need to take care of? In terms of thinking about G2 and G3, are any of these, personal properties, do they need to be identified for Thor, for Gertrude, for the grandkids? Are there any particular items that want to be given to charity? The fine art, for example, does that, is there a goal or objective to have that donated to a museum? All the things that we would want to discuss and talk through with a client.
Matt, let me just add something, if I may, real quick. Regarding the personal property, what we see, it's just coming to mind, we have an estate right now that we've got a couple collector cars that we're valuing for the estate. The trustee had no idea where the title was, who owned them. They thought they were an asset of the estate. Once we helped them find title, get title, and so on and so forth, and then, value the vehicles, they realized the value, they thought there was value. or they were, valuable cars. But they learned that the cars weren't titled properly. And they weren't held properly, and candidly, they didn't have control. What they thought was theirs was not. So, it's very difficult with automobiles and vehicles, things that have title. You have to get them. You have to have them in your hand. When we're tasked to sell them, the first thing we say is, do you have title? If you don't have title, there's nothing to sell. It's very important. Candidly, also one thing, I don't want to go back, but when you talk about valuing personal property, this is a big issue for fiduciaries. They go into a house, they have no idea what's there, guns, paintings, furniture, cash in a box underneath a floorboard that was put there in 1922. How do you know what's there? How do you know what's of value? You've got to hire the professionals. You've got to protect yourself. It's very important. We had a client a couple years ago throw away what turned out to be a very valuable painting that the beneficiaries knew about, didn't tell the trustee, the fiduciary about. And when they cleared out the house, they threw everything away that they thought was valueless. And then it candidly became a real problem. And it was their word against in valuation, what it was worth. And, this is about a $50,000 painting. So little things, they sound little and they turn into big problems. So identifying the asset, having it categorized, appraised, it costs time, it takes time, costs money, but you've got to protect yourself. That's all. I'll let you go on, Matt. I know we're limited.
And that reminds me of a real client story. Similarly, an automobile collector who was, upon his death, donating two of the vehicles to a foundation, yet his son, following his death, was still driving the car around. And we essentially had to take the car away from the son, because at that point it was the property of the foundation. And the last thing we needed was not only miles put on the car, but, God forbid there be a wreck of some sort. So things, all this stuff, the details really matter, and having the experience. And I mean, Todd, you guys deal with this, literally every day on multiple occasions. And so, you've already learned to shave on the face of all this stuff. Other people doing this for the first time, ourselves included, right? I mean, once we figured out who the beneficiary was of the car, we had to put a stop to it.
And maybe on cold water.
I put it on the Pete's coffee.
The what?
I put it on the map to Wells Fargo.
Oh, it's
the
on
one
cold
next to
water,
Pete's, right?
the cold water branch.
Maybe we
Yeah,
can
so-
Denise.
Oh. Shoot.
Hi, Denise. How are you?
I'm so sorry. I'm doing this on phone and
Why don't we move ahead? And I'll kind of wrap this up because we're running out of time. I think, what I wanted to get across to everyone is, Todd, very resourceful in terms of all the stuff that he does and his firm does. Similarly, I think, we work hand in hand with Todd and with fiduciaries and with trust and estate lawyers and CPAs. And, we have the time to get into the details. And what I was trying to get across with this case study is when we put together a balance sheet for a family, it's really a roadmap. It's really an architectural blueprint of things that we can do to add value and help a family achieve its goals and objectives. And, I hope for everyone on the call, you see that as a resource, and you see us as a partner to be able to offload some of these duties and responsibilities, so that you can do what you're doing best, which is focus on your clients and growing your business. And with that, happy to take questions or go into further detail about anything.
Anybody have any questions for Matt? Very valuable. I think Matt, one thing that I have found with Matt, of course, he is a CFA. His financial background is second to none. And I will say he's very happy to have a conversation, pick his brain, ask him questions, strategies, problems, whatever it is. He is a resource, and we look at him the same way. And you never know what you learn from a quick conversation, and how he may or may not be, Whittier may or may not be able to be a resource in that situation, but at least you've got some, very good professional advice. I think that would be an important thing for all of you to remember. We'll send you out his contact information and this presentation. I want to thank Matt very much for doing this. And for all of you, our next Fiduciary Education Forum Zoom presentation will be towards the end of August. That is our initial plan. This topic will be forthcoming. And this, of course, will be on our fiduciaryforum.com website for you to view and view past presentations as well. We're all here to be resources for you, answer questions, do whatever we can. But Matt, I really want to thank you for taking your time out and being part of this. So for everybody else, I'd love you to have or want to wish you a happy rest of the summer. Enjoy, rest, have some vacation, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next Fiduciary Education Forum presentation. Matt, anything else you want to add in closing?
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. And yes, any questions, you want to just strategize and spitball some ideas, happy to get on the phone with anyone. So thanks to everyone for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Take care.